in here and talk about insurance and some of that sort of stuff, but does anybody have any questions? We got one in the back.
One right off the bat. I know I'm speaking broadly here. For the basics, which sounds like a revocable trust and 2 POAs. What is somebody with just a basic life, a couple kids, marriage, and a house? What does that cost them?
Costs about $1,000.
About $1,000.
Yep.
Now,
and that'll last forever.
Forever. Now, could you speak briefly on they're all cons. Why wouldn't somebody want to just run out and grab that boilerplate stuff off the internet? I hear people all the time talking about that. What are the pitfalls of doing that?
Sure. Number one, who are you going to call when you have a question? Number two, who are you going to turn to down the road when something goes wrong? When the will that you found online that you just scratched out, well, it's ambiguous, and now you've got your 2 kids fighting over who gets the house and who gets the assets. Number 3 is just the simple one. You pay for what you get, what you pay for. There's a reason that in your business people hire you guys to do property management. They can do it on their own. They can for sale by owner their house, trying to save the 3, 5, 7%. But they get what they pay for, and in the long run, spending a little bit of money to get something right is incredibly valuable when you're talking about something as important as literally every dollar you have. Literally, who will care for your young children in the event that something happens to you guys, and who's going to be making decisions for you, and what's the process through which they make those decisions if you're alive but unable to make decisions for yourself.
Is there a price break if there's husband and wife that come in together?
$1,000 is for a husband and wife. It's a little cheaper if you're single because we've got to do less work, obviously. And that's that's a ballpark fee. Everybody's situation is different. Obviously, it gets more complicated if it's a second marriage, or if there are some husband has kids, his kids, wife has her kids, and maybe there's joint kids. It gets more complicated. It's nothing we don't see every day, but the basics apply to kind of your traditional person with the spouse and some assets and that sort of stuff. One thing just to quickly touch on, we didn't talk about taxes because for 99% of people they're irrelevant. If you're single, unless you have more than about $5.4 million of assets, you don't pay any estate tax. If you're a married couple, you can functionally double that. So as you can imagine, most of the people that I work with are well under that amount and don't need to worry about that. But it's it's an important thing to just be aware of, that death taxes and estate taxes, at least in the state of Michigan, are not a thing of the past, but only apply north of that $5 or $10 million mark.
If someone had a will, a lot of people stop there and they don't go to the trust. I think you made it clear enough that that's not sufficient, but isn't it particularly insufficient if there's children involved?
Well, yeah, because a will, number one, it should say that a will is where you name a guardian. So hopefully your will says that. But a will is basically a document that just says, hey, immediately on my death, all of my assets go here. Well, I've got a 3-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. If my wife and I both died, legally those kids can't take those assets until they're 18. So for the years between now and the time that they're 18, there's going to be a conservator. And hopefully you've appointed one under your will. If you haven't, then the court is going to do that. But under a will, typically, you're going to say, hey, they get it right off the bat. There's not a good mechanism necessarily under a will to say, let's, when they're 18, pay for them to go to college, and then give them a little bit at 25 and a little bit at 35, which is very easy to do under a trust. Yeah, Mark.
Your home put into a trust, is it still qualified for the 100% homestead exemption?
It does, so long as you and your, so long as it's still your principal residence and you have control over that asset, there won't be any change. And with most people, what we recommend is with their house. If you're a married couple, living in your house, we usually say keep it as joint tenants until the first spouse passes away, because houses, as you guys know, you buy and sell them every so often, and for a lot of people, it's not worth the headache then you have to go through probate, and that's the risk kind of reward that people have to take, but I'd rather they take that after thinking about it, unlike most people who are just taking that risk without knowing what the alternative is.
I was told once, so I'm just curious to flesh it out, because I believe this and it made a lot of sense, but it's counterintuitive. The power of attorneys are actually still very useful, even if you are fully married. And like, so my wife, if with sans power of attorney, the doctors will still come to me if
Yep.
she's incapacitated. But I've been told that having that document makes that a lot easier.
Yes, it absolutely does. You know, if there's an emergent situation at a hospital, if you and your wife get in a car accident and you're okay and she's in surgery, the doctors are going to treat her. You know, the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. They're not going to care off the bat about what their husband says or what the power of attorney document says. And almost universally, whether you have one of these documents or not, a doctor will go to the living spouse and say, hey, your spouse, what do you think? We need to make this decision. The problem is that they're not protected. If they rely on you saying, hey, my wife said pull the plug, or my wife would really want to have her leg amputated in this scenario, and then wife comes out of the coma and says, I never would have had my leg amputated, she can sue that doctor because the doctor had no legal authority to rely on you. They usually will. But that's more kind of out of the goodness of their heart than thinking on the advice of counsel, as I like to say.
And then in the car accident example of both husband and wife were incapacitated, without that document, I have a 6-year-old, they're not going to go to him for direction, so that document then explains the second tier of decision makers.
Right. We always, for most people, you name your spouse as almost all of the power holders, just because that's kind of part of that relationship. But then we always ask you to name one more person: your best friend, your mom, your brother, somebody else, because as